Good morning and welcome to Moments with Melinda. I am your host, Melinda Moulton, and today I have as my guest, Chaz Eller. Hi, how are you, Chaz?
Good. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for being on my show today. Let me tell my viewers a little bit about you. Chaz Eller has been in the recording industry for over 40 years. During that time, he has recorded or produced hundreds of LPs and CDs for numerous independent and major record labels. In the process, he has received 3 Indie Awards for his recording production work and has engineered 2 Grammy-nominated projects. Chaz is also a gifted keyboard musician. So thanks for being with me today. I want to start by going back into your childhood and talking a little bit about where you hail from and your family and a little bit about how you got into music.
Well, I got kind of moved around a fair amount. Only child. My dad was getting his PhD at the University of Oklahoma when I was born. So I was actually an Okie, which always surprises people knowing my political bent. But so we moved from Oklahoma when my dad got a job at the University of Iowa. And so we moved to Iowa City, Iowa when I was about 2. When I was about 3, I started messing around with our piano that was at our house. My parents were very musical. And so my godmother, who was a classical violinist and one of the top female mountain climbers in the world, she Celia Ekai, she was in National Geographic a bunch of times for her climbing, but she was also an excellent classical violinist. And she told my parents, you should really get your son into piano lessons. And so I started taking piano lessons when I was 5, and that took me through the whole era of Iowa, which ended at about 6th grade when we moved to Buffalo, New York for the University of Buffalo.
So what brought you to Vermont?
College and skiing. I'm sorry to say not really in that order, but I came and I got accepted at 4 colleges, and I came and looked at UVM first and just fell in love with it and with the state actually. And yeah, never looked back.
And is that where you got hooked up with most of your musician friends? Was it UVM?
Not really. I hadn't really. I quit music in about 7th grade because at that time when we moved to Buffalo, one of the things that my parents were interested in was getting me a new piano teacher and a better piano teacher than I had access to in Iowa. And so I studied with this guy named Alan Giles, who was head of the Baldwin International Piano Competition. And he took me on. He was a professor at the University of Buffalo, and so he took me on as a student. And unfortunately, it was a mismatch because I really wasn't inclined to be a professional classical pianist. I really, interpreting written pre-existing music wasn't nearly as interesting as creating uncharted territory musically. And so I would practice an hour and a half a day, and he wanted me to practice a minimum of 5 to 6 hours a day. And I just kept falling behind. And one of his other students was a gal named Claudia Hoka, and she would fly to New York City like every other weekend and perform with the New York Philharmonic youth concerts with Leonard Bernstein. And so that was where the bar was set. And I was like way below that in terms of my interest level in pursuing that route. So it kind of was frustrating enough that I quit music in 7th grade and didn't really get back into it until college. And And then after I got out of college, then I started meeting musical acquaintances that are still there today.
So you play the classics, so you must play by ear then as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually that's primarily why Alan Giles took me as a student. Is he had two 9-foot Steinway concert grands in his office, and he sat at one and I sat at the other, and he would just play like random chord clusters, and then I'd have to, play it back based on just listening because I couldn't see his hands.
That's what makes you
So
a great composer. Do you still play the classics at all or not often?
not really. I like Bach for finger exercise, dexterity.
Right.
And it's really like Bach is sort of like jazz, but it's on the beat instead of, having swing to it. It's, the motion is very similar to jazz, I think.
Right. So let's move into your career. You began Charles Eller Studios in 1985 in Burlington, and you eventually moved out to Charlotte and down to Mexico. Talk to us about that journey.
Well, there's a big chapter right before that. And if you don't mind deviating to that,
Yeah,
I don't know.
please do. Please do.
Okay. I started a group in college. I had a jazz group called Citizens Band, and I quickly realized after getting out of school and working with these guys that making $80 a week wasn't probably going to be a good enough income source to pursue music as a full-time avocation. So I ended up, I'm trying to think of the chronology here, but anyway, I ended up recording my band with, I had always been interested in gear, and my dad was sort of an audiophile and big music lover, and I inherited some of that from him. But I made this recording and brought it into Philo Records to see if I could. I had been doing some work for them, freelance, as a doing music charts for copywriting music for folk musicians that weren't musically literate, didn't know how to notate, and you needed to be able to do that at that point to copyright your songs. And so, anyway, I knew Bill Schubart a little bit, and his half brother Mike
Michael.
Couture, and yeah, and I went to Mike and said, after I worked with them a bit and dropped off the charts that I'd handwritten for them, and one day I took in this cassette recording of my band, and Michael listened to it and said, like, how did you do this? And I said, well, I just recorded it to a cassette machine. I set up a studio in my house in Starksboro, and just recorded to this cassette machine. And I wanted to add some reverb with their reverb unit that was, like a professional reverb unit, just to kind of spruce it up. And Michael listened to it and said, like, well, this is really good. This is, you should really consider doing this for a living. And I was like, I had already kind of was looking for another way to express myself musically without starving to death. And so having two careers seemed like a good idea, that are both in music. So anyway, the upshot is that I said, well, give me a job. And they said, well, we don't really have anything right now, but we would be fine if you wanted to come and just hang out. And so I sold all my keyboards to have enough money to live on, hoping that a job would become available at some point with them. And Bill and Mike, both, just who I adore, really did me a huge solid by eventually finding a place for me in their crew. And I was there for 8 years, and without that, introduction, and without that, them behind me and having guys in the industry that were already established, I wouldn't have been able to do it there.
Well, that's beautiful. So hats off to Bill Schubart and Michael Couture for helping you
Yep.
get your start at your studio. So
Yep.
at your studio, I mean, you had some amazing people who frequently visited. You had Tanya Tucker, Stephen Max of Atlantic Records, Curtain Superstars, Mirabi Seba. I mean, you had some incredible people. Talk a little bit about setting up your own studio. First, it was in Burlington, and then you moved it out to
Yep.
Charlotte. But you eventually really brought a lot of incredible artists to Vermont to record up here. And then eventually, of course, you opened your recording studio down in Mexico. Talk a little bit about
Yep.
that journey.
Well, back to Philo, because what happened is that in 1980, I believe, maybe 1979, I had started a group called Kilimanjaro with Paul Asbell and Tony Markellis, and those two guys I met pretty much. I knew Paul a bit, but Tony I met really at the studio, Philo Records studio, because he was on a lot of various folk musicians' albums like Mary McCaslin and Utah Phillips and he anyway. So Paul had written this material and said, would you give it a listen and see what you think? And I was really impressed by it, and we decided to start a group, sort of informally, on our off nights, and it's got a buzz around town. And Bill called me in and said, hey, what do you think we should do about this group Kilimanjaro? He knew I was in the group, but I was kind of wearing two hats because I was working for them, and would have loved their backing, even though they were really known as a folk label and not jazz. So it ended up that we got signed to Philo, and that was sort of the point where I realized, like, being on the road for 3.5 months doing a US tour and playing all these festivals around the world, wasn't going to be very good for my job, security at Philo. And in fact, I then had to pretty much, part ways to focus on Kilimanjaro. And that's when I started my own studio in Burlington. So really, it was all congenial, but my departure with Philo, and I still look back on it lovingly.
So, your pop jazz group Kilimanjaro made it into the top 5 of the National Jazz Radio airplay charts in the 1980s. And you also played with the Unknown Blues Band, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And you've
Right.
gone on
27
tour.
years.
Yeah, and you've gone on tour with Paul Butterfield, Elizabeth Von Trapp, Esther Satterfield, Kenny Dill, W.C. Clark, and Marva Wright, and many, many others. So you've been out there as a performer, not just a recorder, as a performer too.
Right.
Do you enjoy performing? You still perform. I see you all the time pop up on stage with, Bob Stannard and Paul Asbell. So you're still performing. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. And I always will, as long as I can physically do it. I intend to do it because
Well,
it's artists.
Well, you're right. You're a gifted keyboardist and you bring a lot to the stage. So as a studio and location recording engineer, you've worked with Dr. John, Taj Mahal, Bonnie Raitt, Shawn Colvin, Stewart Copeland of the Police, Doc Watson, and the list again goes on and on and on. What are some of your most notable memories of this time in your life?
Oh
One
gosh,
of them.
there's
Give
so
me
many,
one.
so many.
Most notable.
Well, the Bonnie Raitt thing was kind of cool because I had been asked to produce a record for a small Vermont-based record label called Rebop Records, although they were distributed nationally and were kind of a big player in the children's music market. And so I had been asked to do an album called Even Kids Get the Blues, and it was blues authentic blues played with really great sidemen, a lot of my cohorts. But there was a song on it that was written by this little girl named Annalise, and it's called I Want to Be Bonnie. And so Tony, our bass player who played on the project, knew Bonnie from Ann Arbor, Michigan days, and so Bonnie actually came to a couple of our gigs over the years with Big Joe, which was fun. And one of which I was it was really surreal because I was talking to her. She came on Halloween. She had played at the Flynn and then came down to Hunt's. And I was in drag completely for my Halloween costumes. And I was carrying on a conversation and she kept going, "Oh man, I keep thinking I'm talking to a chick," So anyway, but anyway, so we sent her that song, I Want to Be Bonnie, and she just loved it. She said people send me stuff from their kids all the time, but like this is the first time that somebody has really sent something that's meaningful to me. And so I had a nice conversation with her on the phone, and then I wanted her in the lyrics. There's this little girl is singing how she wants to be Bonnie, and incidentally, she's like a redhead, and I mean, she's really looks like she could be Bonnie's daughter. But she says in the song, the lyrics says, "And maybe someday a phone call I'll get saying, quote, 'Hi, this is Bonnie. Want to sing a duet?'" And so since it was a phone call, I thought, okay, well, I'll record Bonnie saying that. So we had this phone patch set up, and I got to talk to her for 15 minutes or so. And she said, like, "I want to be part of this girl's life. I can't promise that I can put her through college, but I mean, she was just." So she put that album on her website for 3 months on the homepage of her website, promoting it for us, which was really cool.
I love it.
She's a sweetheart.
And she keeps coming back to Vermont, which is so great. So there
Yep.
there is a great YouTube video where you're talking about meeting Big Joe Burrell. And this was when you first got thrown into playing the blues. And it's a great story. Could you share very, briefly how you got into playing the blues and moving from pop jazz to blues?
Well, I'm not even sure what that YouTube video is, but I
I'll send you the
do
link.
recall.
I'll send you the link. It's 2.5 minutes and it's very
Oh,
fun. Funny.
interesting. Yeah, so my bandmates in Kilimanjaro, Paul Asbell, who I saw that you have done interview with, and Tony Markellis, who left us unfortunately 2 years ago when he passed on, and those two guys in particular had a blues background. Paul had an enormous blues background. Playing, with Muddy Waters and Howlin' Wolf, and he's on the Fathers and Sons record. And people should go to his interview with you and get all the facts. But he and Tony and a fellow named Martin Grosswent, who was a Philo artist, had started this group called the Unknown Blues Band, and they started it before we met Big Joe. And so they invited me to come down and join. And I had never played blues really, but it was easy for me. I knew what it was supposed to sound like. And they had an old upright piano at Hunt's, and so I went down and joined them. And I think on the second or third gig that I did with the band, Paul had met Big Joe at a musicians union Christmas party, and invited him to come down. And as soon as Joe joined us, it was like this is it. We're doing this other band. And so it was, the Unknown Blues Band featuring Big Joe Burrell. And it was great because we would go away for 6 months, sometimes, or 3.5 months usually for a tour, but we do 2 tours I think in 84 and 85, we did 2 tours in one year. So we were out for about 6 months. And we would go away and play exclusively Kilimanjaro material, doing one-nighters at various clubs around the country and festivals. And then we'd come back after we got sort of burned out on playing the same music for 3.5 months every night. We'd come back and totally put different hats on and play this really fun, danceable blues. And it was fun, that juxtaposition of the two bands was great because it was always kind of kept each band fresh for us. And
So
we
you
loved
merged.
it.
So you are a member of the Vermont Blues Society, and I want to send folks to the website. It's www.vermontbluessociety.org. It's a great group of musicians from the state. So you also do live concert engineering work, which has taken you to some of the top concert halls in the world, such as Carnegie Hall, Metropolitan Opera House, Avery Fisher Hall, Lincoln Center, and Tanglewood, to just name a few. So I thought that was pretty cool that you've also done engineering at some of these incredible venues. But as we're kind of running out of time here, I understand that the Lane Gibson has taken over your studio, but you're still there.
Mhm.
And so I wanted people to know that website is lanegibson.com. If you're looking for any engineering work, you're still a part of that group. So I want to talk to you a little bit about your collaboration with Spencer Lewis, the Lewis and Eller
Mhm.
duo. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Well, way back, and I don't know how many years, but I'm guessing 20 years ago, Spencer came into the studio and had me put keyboard parts on some of his music. And it was a really fun collaboration and popular. He sold a lot of CDs. He had his own distribution system where he had these racks of CDs in various stores around the state and around New England, I believe. But anyway, so we've always just kind of, he'll every couple years he'll give me a call and say, "Hey, I got a couple new songs I'd like you to play on." And last year we actually did several gigs together, which was fun. We did, I think 15 years ago, we did the Flynn Space. We did a show there. But yeah, it's kind of a reoccurring
So how do people
music.
find out about where you're playing? I mean, do you have a site that people can go to so they can become an
Well, my face, really for Facebook is for me is primarily
good?
useful
Well,
for
then I'm going to
getting the word.
encourage my viewers to become followers of Chaz Eller on Facebook, because I think we'd all love to come and hear you and be a part of your music scene. So what are you working on right now? What's your current
Um,
project?
I'm currently producing a project for Leon Leroy Preston, who is the co-founder of Asleep at the Wheel, the Texas swing band from Austin, and I think they're based out of Austin. And Leroy's a great songwriter. He wrote a song that became a hit for Roseanne Cash, and followed that up with another song that she did, and he co-wrote a song for Katie Lang, and he's written stuff for Asleep at the Wheel. And so anyway, he's got 10 songs that I brought in basically my current band with Paul Asbell, Jeff Salisbury, and Clyde Statz as a rhythm section, and we are backing up Leroy in the studio in Charlotte, and having a lot of fun doing it. He's great.
Outstanding. Well, you have to let us know when that album comes out. So,
Yeah,
so Chaz, what do you make of today's music, and who are some of your favorite musical artists of today?
boy, that's a good question. Jacob Collier gets my attention. He's pretty brilliant, and um, I'm just blanking out now. And
That's okay.
oh, Corey Henry uh, as a keyboard player is really inspiring to me. Actually, Jacob Collier is a great keyboard player too, but he's a multi-instrumentalist and
There,
great singer. And
there's some amazing musicians with the Vermont Blues Society. I got to tell you, man. I mean, and the music in Vermont
yeah, we
is
have a lot of local talent
there
that's
really
here.
is. So I wanted to ask you, because this has been on my mind lately. Do you believe that our music scene is engaged in the issues of our time the way we were back in the 60s and 70s?
No, I don't think so. But I mean, I don't know that. Are you talking about the blues? Well, the
No, I'm talking
music.
about during our 60s revolution. I mean, you're part of that era. We
Oh,
had
but
we had
not just locally, but I mean
oh no,
in
no.
global.
I'm talking about globally. I mean, we had, the Farm Aid, we had all these different, groups coming together to, plus the music was so instrumental and no pun intended in helping us to think through the time that we were living in. And I'm just not I'm just asking you how you feel because I would like to see more music being written that sort of focuses on our time. And I was just wondering,
Yeah, well, I don't know if you seen that I think it's a Netflix show it's called The Greatest Night in Pop Music.
yes,
It's about the making of We Are the World.
yes,
It is so good.
it is so
I
good.
mean, we all know the story, but when you see the video that they made out of it, it's really incredible. And it does make you think back like, yeah, this people like here's like every star in the world practically at this thing,
Well,
and they're all donating their time and
and we we
they're
had Joan Baez, we had Bob Dylan, we had Crosby, Stills and Nash. I mean, the musicians wrote, I mean, well, Woodstock, all the music from Woodstock. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. But I do encourage our young people, to write songs about our time. I think it's really important.
yeah.
So there have been some amazing success stories just recently, here in Vermont. Let me get us to the gallery here. Annie's Mitchell for her Tony Award-winning musical Hadestown and Shana Taub for Shuffs now on Broadway. I mean, these two women have hit Broadway and boom,
I
Tony
know.
was here, boom. I mean, some of the young musicians and women musicians here in Vermont are extraordinary.
Yeah.
So we're coming to the end of our interview here. I wanted to ask you, as a wise old music man, indomitable music man, if you could give us some perspective on our world today, our democracy and the realities of climate change. Do you hold hope for our species' future?
Uh, yeah, I'm always an optimist, but I am also pretty concerned about a lot of what's going on right now. And of course that could be a whole show in itself, but uh
But I ask
you
this
know,
question of all my interviewees.
yeah.
At the end, I always say, so what's your, and I get this wide range of where people are coming from on this. And I just, from a musician's perspective and somebody from I assume you're a 60s, 60s, 70s child, right?
Yeah.
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 That what is your wisdom for the viewers of my show coming from Chaz Eller?
Well, I've been kind of looking over my shoulder at retirement, from certain aspects of my career, and I would really like to, think that I could transfer some of that energy into, um, you know, getting more involved, in some of the political things that badly need our
Well,
attention.
I'm going to hold you to that. And rather than using the word retirement, I would call it repurposing because
Yeah, thanks.
you'll always play music. You'll always
Yeah.
be called upon to participate. But yeah, I think I can't believe that we're sort of fighting the same fights that we fought, 50 years ago.
Yeah. Well, I hope we're winning at it at
Yeah.
least.
So what's on for the rest of your day, Mr. Eller?
Um, Well, just getting ready to go back in and do some keyboard parts with Leroy Preston, who I was telling you about. And yeah, just it seems like I kind of jokingly are talking about retirement because I really never am going to quit doing either the engineering or the keyboards that I do. But I also have a lot of my stuff set up in the basement of my house here in Waltham, Vermont, and I enjoy playing on people's projects. They send me the tracks. It can all be done remotely, and I've got 31 keyboards or something that I can put on just about any sound that people want, and enjoyed learning the different styles and that they require.
Well, I believe that you'll always be making music. I don't think we ever stop making music. Um, and
Right.
you're not going anywhere, and you will be busy for the rest of your life. And now you'll be maybe choosing things that you want to do rather than things that you have to do, which is always wonderful. So thank
Yeah.
you for your time. I've known you for
Thanks for
so
having
many
me.
years, and I'm so honored and pleasured that you joined me today, and I got to learn, and my viewers got to learn a little bit more about you, Chaz. Thank you for that.
Well, thank you.
And to my viewers, I want to thank you for joining us today, and I will see you soon. Have a beautiful day. Bye-bye.